What do you make? I mean, and maybe you are downsizing. 80295 is the text. Now, Janis Sharp has spent the last 10 years fighting to prevent her son being extradited to America for hacking into the Pentagon computer. Her son, Gary McKinnon, suffers from Asperger's. His battle finally came to an end just before last Christmas when the UK confirmed it wouldn't press charges here. Now Janis has written about her experience, and she's been telling us about what she and Gary went through.
The whole process was terrifying. I mean, it was permanent fear, and it's very strange to live in such permanent fear. You wake up like that, you go to sleep like that, you keep looking for an end. And I'm so glad I didn't realise that it would be 10 years, because it would be so difficult to have known you'd have to go on for such a long time. But it was fear. The overwhelming feeling was just fear.
And did Gary's feelings change much over this time, Janis? How was his behaviour?
Gary got worse. He went more into himself until he closed down. He virtually closed down. His teeth would be clenched, his fist would be held tight. He saw the darker side of the world, and it changed him so much. He was sort of locked inside himself. He didn't want to hear friends ring up or speak to anyone. It was terrible for Gary, and there was many times that I feel we almost lost Gary, and thankfully he's here today.
What do you mean you almost lost him?
Well, the suicidal thing, finding things in the house and that he could have taken his own life with that I hadn't realised. And luckily we got the help of some of the best psychiatrists there are, and Gary was able to open up to Professor Simon Baron-Cohen and Dr. Vermeulen and Professor Turk, lots of them, and that really, they saved Gary's life. And all of the people that came forward to help us is what saved Gary.
And what saved you, Janis? What got you through this? Because it was such a long journey for you.
I just knew he couldn't go. Apart from that, Gary wouldn't last 5 minutes in a place. He's never away from home. To be on the other side of the world, away from everything and everyone he had known. But when Ian Norris, another man, got extradited, Gary had said, well, why didn't he and his wife just take an overdose? Because to him, it was pure logic. The absolute logic was not to go there, and to take your own life was much preferable. But it was not even an emotional decision. It was absolute logic. But I think a lot to do with how my mum was, a lot to do with my childhood, the freedom we had to make decisions. I think, and you learn, you're taught, you just keep going, you keep going, you keep going. And that's how we were brought up, basically.
Do you know, Janis, it's interesting in life, isn't it? We go through our lives and things happen to us now. Things happen to Laura and to me, but they're nothing compared to what happened to you, with the world's scrutiny on you. How did you cope with that? And just give me a wee glimpse into what you meant earlier when you said you were scared, you had fear.
Just the terror that they would take Gary away and what would happen to him, the terror that he would take his own life. And he's so talented, he's so intelligent, he's such a good guy, and it just seemed so undeserved. I mean, his mistake was leaving silly notes, cyber notes, saying your security's awful and all these little political things he left. It takes over you. All I could think about was Gary. I became a complete bore. There's nothing else I wanted to talk about. I didn't want to speak about any sort of frivolous things or any sort of chit-chat. All I could think of and talk about and do was Gary. Because I knew I had to keep him here, and I really believed that I could. That if I believed I could, and if I did everything I could, that he would not go. And that was my sole, just a great force. But fortunately, other people who cared about justice joined in, and it was this force of good. That's what I believe, that just swept through and saved Gary's life. But not only that, woke people up to what extradition actually is. Should you be extradited if you've never left the country you were in? It's raised so many issues, because it was always meant for fugitives who had fled from a heinous crime. And the good in people is what's come out of this that is amazing. There are so many good people who don't know you, have never met you, and the lengths they will go to help has really given me such massive faith in human nature.
And how are you doing now, Janis, and how's Gary and what's he doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I just wake up every day and think, I'm free, we're free, it's great. Gary is getting there. He's seeing a therapist, Emmy van Derzen, who's a wonderful woman. We saw him laugh in the back of the car one day for the first time, and seeing him laugh was wonderful. The sad thing is Gary's dad lives in Glasgow, and Gary can't go to Scotland because if he went to Scotland, it could start all over again. And I know that if his dad got really ill or died, he would want to be with him, and he couldn't. And so that is a very sad part, that Gary cannot go to Scotland.
Why is that, Janis?
Because basically it's England and Wales that if he stays here, the extradition stopped in England and Wales. But if Gary went back to Scotland, it could start all over again.
Right.
America could ask extradition requests from Scotland, and the whole thing could start again.
Did it surprise you that this problem was with the United States, one of our allies? Did you find that difficult to deal with?
Yeah, I did, because years ago, when Gary actually did this in 2002, they had to show prima facie evidence before they could extradite anyone, and you could contest it in a court and prove you didn't do the alleged damage. Whereas they brought this new treaty in, they wrote it in 2003, it didn't start being used until late 2004, then they could extradite someone with no evidence. But the thing is, it seems to be British people who are being targeted, but the reason for that is basically our government signed our rights away, and whereas France and Ireland have the same treaty, but they have a clause in theirs that their own citizens are tried at home if the crime was committed on their own soil. Now that seems pretty sensible to me, and something that we should never have given away.
Janis, these things, last thing, can tear families apart and can change people. Have you been changed?
I've been changed because I used to be so shy and didn't like answering the telephone and didn't like answering the door. I couldn't hide anymore, so I think it made me grow up quickly at a late age.
That's Janis Sharp, who spent 10 years fighting to stop her son being extradited to America. And Mark Smith texted in. He said, listen, Gary managed to hack into the Pentagon security system. They shouldn't have been extraditing him. They should have been employing him. And lots of other texts too. Keep them coming in. 80295.